Well, good morning, Agile Day Twin Cities. My name is Matt Gentleman. I'm a solutions architect with Cprime. How are we enjoying the session so far? That was like a polite golf clap.
Only down from here, yeah.
Yeah. I said, how are we doing enjoying the sessions at Agile Twin Cities 2022 so far? Mildly better. I have the distinct honor of introducing Dave Laribee. Dave is a coach, developer, teacher, and international speaker, co-founder of Nerd Noir. He also, right. Yeah. That's like a film genre, right?
Damn. You're one of 20% of people that got it right. Good job. Anyway, keep
going.
Thank
you. Thank you. I appreciate that. He also serves as a head of dojos and strategic advisor for Cprime, which has the longest running and largest dojo practice in the industry. These days, you can find him working across several active dojos, collaborating with leaders on strategy and helping to build capable coaching teams at Fortune 500 firms and hyper-growth startups. Please give a warm welcome for Dave.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. So this talk is 5 spicy strategies for change, and just a little additional stuff about me that's going to kind of maybe help you understand where I'm coming from and what my particular bundle of biases is and where this experience originates. So I am head of dojos for Cprime. You told me that thing was going to beep, but it didn't prepare me. And definitely super triggered right now. Great way to start a presentation. So I work with Cprime kind of to, help their dojo practice thrive and kind of do these immersive learning experience kind of environments in the transformational things we've got going on. My background is kind of engineer. Originally, I worked at version 1 for many years. I worked in software product companies. And I've been a product manager, I've been a leader, and now I'm coach and entrepreneur. So my pandemic project was to get together with my business and life partner, Alex, there. And we decided to create a coaching school for dojo immersive learning coaching. We think it's a different enough stance that it merits kind of its own approach. And we've been really fortunate to work with about 70 coaches since we launched, and it's going really well. So I see some graduates here, Dojo Academy graduates. Raise your hand. Ken France, Ed Tilford. Okay. Well, eventually we're going to get you all. All right. So I'm going to launch right into it, right? Spicy strategies. First one, choose collaboration over process, right? Anytime you have a choice, choose collaboration over process. And we'll talk a little bit about what this means. It's a very story-driven talk, so I'm going to share stories from my travels. I think I've worked for about half of you in this room, so thanks for the work. So backing this, I have a kind of a story with that backs this wisdom up. I'm coaching in a dojo challenge, right? And the team decides they want to spend their time becoming more T-shaped, right? You saw that in Ann Steiner's talk this morning. More generalists, a little bit of specialty, more capable, a little bit more full stack, whatever that means. But their skills are kind of more equally spread across the team. And to do this, we set a goal. And I think that's kind of key to my coaching practice is that the team sets a goal external to me. I'm not setting the goal for them, right? Their goal is to become more T-shaped. And the means to do that is mob programming. I'm having some cutouts on the audio here. And so we're going to work together in a mob for this 6-week kind of standard dojo challenge. So one of our first asks as coaches when we start working with the teams is just show us how you work now. Like take us to your Jira, show us what your product is, just give us what's going down. And they put their Jira board up on the screen, and this is what we found. So you can see lots of handoffs, maybe a little bit of over-checking going on. You've got ready to dev to, ready to check, ready to review to ready to test. So it's like 3 queues or 3 states and buffer sets for 8 people. Right, so lots and lots of handoffs. And you can kind of see with this team that they're really relying on process to kind of model their workflow. So we asked, what would it look like if we just deleted all that junk? Like since we're using mob programming anyway, what if we just deleted all your states and queues, right? And we'll do it over here on this whiteboard, right? And we'll see how it goes. Let's give that a try. So the team was game. So we added that to the experiment. And the conditions were right for experimentation. So again, the team had identified the goal of becoming more T-shaped, and we're in that dojo space where experimentation is kind of expected, so those conditions are already pre-negotiated before the team ever shows up. So we start getting into collaboration. They start seeing and explaining the tips and tricks of their respective roles. So things like role empathy come from mob programming. It's just kind of an initial side effect. Oh, you do this? That's how you do that? Oh, this code underlying our tests is very similar to Apex Salesforce code? Okay, so those kind of moments start popping. And that's exactly what we're seeing here. So dude on the right is a developer. The guy on the left is a test automation pro, so an SDET, software design engineer and test. And they're working through a single story by writing a cucumber specification and then implementing the necessary code. So kind of like a larger grained, like ATDD, acceptance test driven development loop. And rinse and repeat until the story is shipped. So rather than a story kind of progressing through a process, the story comes to a pair or a mob, and they work through it together. So it's kind of collaboration over process. And it's more than those two. So off camera, what you can't see is 4 other people in the mob. So it's like 3 SDETs and 3 developers. And driver navigator pairs every 10 minutes. And each individual gets to kind of contribute their best ideas, right? Best ideas about design, best idea about what test should we write next, best ideas about solution architecture. So it's kind of real-time design, real-time adaptation, real-time collaboration, right? You don't need all these handoffs. You don't need inventory. You don't need buffers, right? So this is kind of the promised land of mob programming, and it works pretty regularly. But mob programming, is it a process? A little bit, right? They're certainly learning driver navigator. They're learning some things, but it's so automatic. It's almost, to me, more a set of working agreements, an automatic way of working, that we don't really think about the process. Yet, stuff in our process to do for us is happening anyway. Okay, so after a couple weeks, the teams found that their productivity didn't just stay the same, it went up slightly, right? Which is counterintuitive because we're now working, this mic does the same thing, must be it's all good, we're gonna make it work. Extremely disorienting. They found that their kind of productivity went up a little bit, but they also found other properties of what they're building, like the quality and the kind of symmetry and the opinions that people had about design started to converge. So more properties than just delivery output kind of had some bump, right? And this should look familiar to you, right? This is an Agile conference. Remember this document, right, 2001? So when you start looking at these platitudes, you really start to have to say, okay, what strategies are going to get us to those platitudes? Mobbing, pairing, ensemble, programming, those are the kinds of things that work. So choose collaboration over process. We're going to turn up the spice level a little bit here, right? Who's a coach? I'm saying you should be actively trying to destroy your role. Okay. And this is, talk about platitudes or truisms or things that become cliches, right? We've heard this for a long time. Work your way out of a job. And, it's great wisdom, but we don't want to make our teams dependent on us, right? That's essentially what this means, right? We want to help them achieve their goal, get to a higher state, and then move on, okay? Like many platitudes, work your way out of a job becomes a bit of a cliche. It's just, it's like something we know we should do, but we forget to do it. It's that whole thing, like coaches are better at giving advice than taking it kind of thing, right? So another way of putting this is look at coaching as a skill, right? Not a role, right? And I'm not saying totally destroy the coaching role, because if you adopt this as a coach, you kind of end up becoming a coach, right? You start coaching the coaching activity, which is a lot of coaching, right? But since that job of a coach is to transfer their skill to the people they're working, help them achieve their goals, These people, once attaining fluency with that skill, might go on to coach that skill themselves. So one of the tools we use in kind of the dojo is a skills matrix, right? And I'm going to explain how we use it in some depth. And I've become very reliant on this particular tool to really understand where the team is and to create these moments of where they can kind of do some peer coaching. So at the beginning, the art of this is you have to kind of figure out on the top axis. This may not work. Yeah, this top axis. You have to figure out what skills are important to the team, just in their everyday work, right? But also, like in a challenge, we might be focusing on certain skills, right? We might be focusing like skills they're trying to acquire just in that challenge. So we have to kind of curate. If you don't curate it, it can be very, very long. I've had teams that put every skill they've ever heard of, on this kind of buzzword, ultimate buzzword bingo, and it looks like this superstar destroyer kind of, set of paper. So you really have to curate this down. So I'd like to keep it to like 10 or 12 skills. What are we focusing on in the challenge? And these range from soft skills, right, but kind of important skills that are human skills, social skills that we need to be successful. So you see business knowledge, platform knowledge, communication skills, presentation skills, to the more, hard skills like we're looking for in engineers, right? In this case, this team is a Salesforce. They're building Salesforce applications. So on the left, we have the team members, right, in their respective roles. Names have been protected for anonymity. And on the bottom, I did not protect these names. You've got Dave and Ed. Ed's in the audience right there, so he can tell you all about this one. Dave, that's me. Right? And so one kind of key feature here is when you're putting this together is to put yourself as a coach on there. And you can see we don't know it all. There's things that we want to know, so we're exhibiting curiosity. But also I think an important property of coach is kind of this authenticity and to not say I know everything or pretend to know everything, but to demonstrate learning behavior when I don't know something. Right? So we put ourselves up there. So you know what we can help you with. You know when you should expect us to maybe be in the front of the room or take a little bit more active role guiding you through something, right? So let's explain the legend on the right. So in the legend, and this is something we would do to the team is explain, this is what this means. And it's very relative and it's intentional by design. It's not 1 through 10. NA means not applicable. Either they chose not to rate themselves, it isn't something they'd ever do, right? So far out of the role that is just not applicable. Or maybe even for the time of the challenge, it's something that they don't want to be typecast anymore. I don't want to write any more stinking reports, right? They could put an NA, and it's their choice. Next one, want it, means that they want to improve their skill. Doesn't mean they don't have that skill at all. Simply means that they want to level up a little bit. They want to use this time to invest in those kind of career marketable skills. Or maybe they're really good, but they want to become fluent, right? But they're really actively seeking it. So there's some overlap. These aren't hard categories. And it's really based on your interpretation. Got it means that you're pretty comfortable with it. And if you were given a task that required that skill, you would kind of be able to solo on that, right? Just kind of a measure of, okay, I feel pretty proficient with that. And can teach means that you're capable or willing to help others, right? You would like to help your team level up. That might mean that at one end of the spectrum, you'd like to a shot at it, an original time, like let me try this, right? On the other end of the spectrum, it might mean that I've helped others many, many times and I'm very fluent with kind of coaching. Right? And last one, leveled up, we'll get to that in a minute. That has its own kind of set of definitions. Right? So again, this is self-assessment. We can see a few opportunities to share load with coaching here. I mean, you've got like the business knowledge piece, right? Couple people, Kate can teach it, right? Kevin got it. So you can maybe get them together to prepare some mini workshops to kind of share, how does this complicated domains work, right? As a coach, you're just kind of setting that condition. You're just creating the environment where these things can happen. You could see in the middle, like between the SF config, SF code, and test automation. Lots of pairing opportunities there. Lots of people that are really strong with testing. Other folks are really strong with kind of the programming, right? So you can find those. CI/CD. I'm just trying to give you examples of how I read these tea leaves and how I kind of start to inform my coaching plan with a team. Look at CI/CD. I'm like, okay, couple people can teach it, but it's kind of an uneven peak and valley in the team. Some people want it, some people feel like they have it. So maybe in that mob, when we go to push our code, we could follow the pipeline and see what happens, then have a really quick discussion about the stages under the pipeline and what happens and how to, what does tailing the log look like and what do all these messages mean? How do you act on that? Right? So 30 days later, that's 30 business days, 5 business days a week, 6 weeks, typical dojo challenge. That's kind of what we recommend. We can start to see where people leveled up. This is good data, right? This is data you can use to keep your program alive, right? Showing that value that you produce. This is data that you can show to the team and say, look, you have become literally a little bit more T-shaped with all this kind of blue over there. But what does level up really mean? We should define level up. And when I introduce this to a team, I give them this definition. It means that you put new knowledge into practice, or you gained a better understanding of that skill, or you helped someone acquire that skill or refine that skill, and in doing so, you practiced teaching and coaching. You were invited to the coaching activity. Your coaching skill implicitly went up. But I try to make this a moment where they recognize that. So changing the roles of SDET and Dev isn't just possible. Significant progress had been made on this team. This was, Ed will remember at Free Folk, they gave us hugs on the way out. Not all challenges end that way, but I'm going to take the wins where I can find them, right? Now they're all engineers. That's how they identify. That's that middle column between SF config, code, and test automation. But more than that, they've each delivered or received dozens, if not hundreds, of micro coaching interactions without me being at the center of that, right? I created conditions for coaching. So pro tip, as a coach, being lazy is a good thing. Arriving at laziness there. Now, it takes effort up front, but the payoff is you can kind of sit back and they will be coaching each other, which is, I think, a really profound way of creating that kind of Voltron sense of team, not just a group of people working together. So look for those conditions to create peer-to-peer coaching, and that's what I mean by destroy that coaching role. Ask yourself, how can I be less present at the center of things? How can I more create the conditions where learning can happen? Okay. So next spicy strategy is exploit iteration. I mean really lean into iteration. I'm not talking incrementation. I'm not talking hunks of work. But I'm talking about period of time over period of time, finding learning opportunities that will inform what you're developing. Literally, you could call this planning with feedback, right? So in the enterprise where I kind of lurk as enterprise cryptid, I hear a lot of mindset this, mindset that, right? It's mindset. And when you probe just a little bit, you kind of get at this assumption that mindset comes from like a 2 to 3 day training event, right? And I just reject that notion entirely. We don't begin with mindset and then end with skill. While creating skill, mindset emerges, right? Mindset comes with results and proof. That takes time, right? And this all starts with practice for me. But a lot of organizations are so ultra focused on commitments and deliverables that they don't make enough room for practice. Like, it's really hard to find where do you actually practice and experiment and fail and learn and, grow. And I'm not talking learning here. Learning's important, but learning without practice doesn't become habit. So the two go hand in hand. Learn something, practice it a bunch, form a habit, change the behavior, change the culture when you start to compound these things. So in our dojos, we often say slow down to speed up. And this is like intentional messaging to get your delivery-minded folks. You have to meet them where they're at, just like everyone else, right? One of those cliches and platitudes. But you have to meet people that really care about planning where they're at. And you have to kind of help them understand or even measure how an investment of learning pays the kinds of dividends they care about, in this case like delivery. So increasing the speed or relevancy of delivery. And you can measure that. I mean, this is what Jira is good at. This is, any number of dashboard vendors pimping DORA, SDO metrics. You can measure this. You can say, we were here before, we were here after. So you might take a dip in delivery quantity at first, and you kind of have to let them know that. I would say this is kind of at the close of the sale of bringing a team into a challenge. I wouldn't necessarily lead with this, right? I would open with, here's the promised land, and then, when we go back into the back room to do the financing documents, then we kind of talk about this stuff. And, all kinds of ways to measure it. So let's get a little bit back to exploit iteration, and I'll show you kind of the loop that we use in the dojo, this little loop. Plan, do, share, reflect. Should sound familiar, right? Any Deming nerds? Plan, do, check. I mean, you should all be Deming nerds. If you're not, you will be at some point, right? Plan, do, check, act. Very much inspired by that, right? So plan, we get together for minutes, really quickly. I mean, these are short iterations. They're 2 days, right? Monday, Tuesday is an iteration. Wednesday, Thursday is an iteration, right? And we go through this routine in planning. What should we do in the next 2 days? Sounds like every Scrum ever, right? What's our sprint commitment, right? That's the first question. Then we say, what will we want to learn in the next 2 days? What will we want to practice in the next 2 days? So we're adding different things than just user stories to that 2-day sprint, right? Anything about our customer or process or system that's opaque to us that we want to make visible, right? And once we kind of get all that listed out, we say, okay, what of that fits in 2 days? So we are doing a little bit of sizing, kind of no estimates, hashtag no estimates, right? And as a coach, I'm just kind of there to make sure they have a balanced plan. I'm making sure, okay, do we really want to push full tilt on delivery? Do we want to add some kind of learning component to this? How are we going to approach this in a novel way? That's what you're kind of doing as a coach, is just making sure that plan aligns to the goal that the team set. So we do this in small groups. The do section is just all collaborative. So mob ensemble programming, pair programming makes sense for the kind of technical side of it. But, product people fold into this as well. So design studios or, user journey mapping or going out to visit customers. We do that sometimes, imagine that, right? But we try to do it together. So the do, we kind of have this principle, use the buddy system. We're trying to make sure that the doing is a collaborative effort. So at the end of our 2-day sprint, we gather what we've done, what we've learned, and what our plan for where we're headed next. And that's what we present. And we present that to a group of interested parties that are going to vary from team to team. So sometimes what we're doing is inherently really technical. So we might be presenting to architects or COE leaders or people that kind of care about the technical stakes. Right? Sometimes it's very product, so we'll be presenting to customers, right? Or senior product managers or people in the product org, right? But whoever we're presenting to, the goal isn't to kind of get validation and applause. I mean, that's always nice. Who doesn't like a little external validation now and again, right? But the goal is to always get feedback that we can carry forward into our next plan, right? The goal is to always how might we get more value out of taking this time to share, right? Does it change our plan? Does it inform our plan? Does it sharpen it? Does it invalidate it, right? Did we spend 2 days pursuing a bad idea? Cool, we learned, right? So this is what I mean by exploit iteration. And, reflection's another stage in there. That's kind of where you make that gap between processing what we shared and what that next plan is. And we'll do other things in there, but that's kind of the common thing. Okay, so our iterations are super small, like 2 days small, tiny, tiny iterations. And in 6 weeks, 30 business days, we get to do this 12 times. So learning and habits can really take hold. You get this kind of deliberate practice thing. Anyone seen this? This is the forgetting curve, right? So that red line typifies how things go with a 2-day course. You go to a 2-day course, You learn about, I don't know, AWS cloud architecture stuff. You're really stoked on it. Get into the weekend, enjoy your weekend. Monday comes by, you get fire drills on Slack. Tuesday, more fire drills. Wednesday, you're like, I'm going to do something with AWS, and I kind of forgot most of it, right? It's the idea that you can have this knowledge, but if you don't connect it to practice and that kind of kinetic usage of that knowledge, it's not really going to sit in. So the blue lines kind of show you that, right, where you get to kind of repeat. So something like test-driven development, classic example. Legendary ass-kicking learning curve, right? No one likes to do it. It's because they haven't seen the value, right? But if you take 3, 4, 5 weeks and do it, finish a couple stories, produce more tests than you ever have in your life, you start to kind of see that value. Right, so this is kind of built into the approach. Okay. 4, design for cultural impact. Now we're scoping up a little bit. No, I said this in Jackie and Angela's session, but team to me can mean, any group of people that are trying to get more results by working together. Leadership, coaching teams, product teams, feature teams, whatever, right? But I want to kind of move up to a bit broader kind of organizational level thing, right? So here's a story. A large portfolio in an insurance company wanted to replace their mission-critical legacy monolithic application with a new system built using microservices architecture, right? What could go wrong? Who's done a microservices architecture? Okay, all right. Well, come eat lunch with me, and we'll just have a group therapy session. All right, and it's a legitimate thing. This is I loved working with this group. Plucky, resilient, smart people. 15-year-old. How old is .NET? That's how old their application was, right? Ancient. And it actually had some like VB6 COM interop stuff in it. This is where I justify being on the technical track, so just go with me. And, their approach, what seems sensible, right? We want microservices because we're building something new, right? And that's the new hotness, and that's how you build cloud-native applications. Great. So they kind of got their architecture group together, and they did the ivory tower thing, right? And went into a conference room for a month or 2 or 3, and they created a blueprint, right? That blueprint, this is normal. I'm not bagging on this too much. You do have to figure out like service boundaries and make an educated guess about that. You do have to do bake-offs on technology, understand what stack you're using. Is it event-driven, event source, streams? Like, how are you going to put this stuff together, right? Where does REST matter? And it has to get done. So they came out with a blueprint, really happy with their plan. Next thing they did is, this is where I got involved in this mix. I was kind of in the organization shopping these kind of dojo challenges, and they're like, hey, Dave, come over here and we'll have a couple challenges to get these teams started in a way that isn't going to lead them down a legacy path where we were. So TDD, refactoring, good design, mobbing, pairing, the usual suspects, right? Well, the outcome is we started these dojo challenges, and we found this kind of shifting sands problem. Everyone was changing everyone's code all the time. You couldn't depend on a contract to stay stable. You would get into working and, you'd have all these merge conflicts or, issues. It was a kind of this really, if you know Kinevin, like this really ordered, beautiful blueprint slipped into disorder like instantly, right? So, the initiative had to restart and rethink their approach. So basically months of delay, which, if you think about a 15, 20-year-old legacy application, isn't that bad. It's kind of failing fast, like at least in geological time, right? And I think where they went wrong is in assuming only the technical part of the architecture, only the technical part of the org needed to change, when in fact, the business architecture, the organization needed to change, right? They were used to collective ownership, which is like XP nerds everywhere will tell you, they can't stop telling you, it's like one of the best practices. But maybe not in microservices architecture, They were used to this kind of model where their organizational bureaucracy could just treat their teams as fungible and feature teams and kind of move them around to different parts of the code base as their Gantt chart kind of dictated. I mean, roadmap, right, dictated, right? So the architect-driven strategy was implicit, right? It wasn't an explicit strategy. It was just like, well, that's what architects do, right? And I think they were a little bit more on the solution architecture side than maybe an enterprise architect or someone that you would think of as an architect as holistically considering all these facets. So we've known, I mean, pretty early on, certainly at the time this happened, microservices implies an organizational structure. You build it, you own it. Really, product teams tend to do much better with a kind of microservices architecture rather than like a feature team or a project team. Right? So, I mean, sounds like maybe they didn't have that experience with microservices architecture in-house. So how could we have approached that differently? Well, one, hire an expert. I know a little bit about microservices. I'm not an expert, right? I got involved pretty late in the game here. I might have been able to say, hey, I don't want to rethink this collective ownership plan. But they should have hired someone that actually had gone through the ringer and done a rewrite or carved out workloads or whatever that had created a microservices architecture with a team and had all the scars and learnings and war stories to kind of go with that, right? That would be one way to start. Beyond that, I think that expert would have helped them select tactics to transition here. So, I think reorganizing to small autonomous teams and also thinking about how that, as Jackie calls it, frozen middle changes. What change must they make? Are they going to now act as like technical program managers, right? So that if you have an impact that crosses multiple teams, you do have some, like big tech does, technical program management probably would be the way to go, right? But they're going to have to invest in the teams having more autonomy and more control over small portfolios of services. Right? And then the technical stuff can happen, right? We could talk about inner sourcing, right? Using an internal open source model to kind of manage changes between the teams. So we accept pull requests as long as they adhere to these qualities, right? Tests, et cetera. And then things like consumer-driven contracts or pact broker, kind of things that would let you be proactive about, we're going to make a change to this API, what are we going to break downstream? Right? So different set of tactics would have been selected if you had only kind of moved that strategy to consider that cultural impact. So my point here is any big change should be run through the strategic lens, right? The thing you're changing often has dependent things that have to change as a result. This is the kind of moral of the story. So seek to understand the cultural impact of change. Okay, last strategy, scale like a product. So I mean, scale your transformations like a product, scale your change like a product. So I'm going to launch into another story here. Background, a large retailer wants to move its digital group from a project-driven to a product-led organization. They want to scale instantly, like overnight. So like 10 plus teams in a Dojo challenge concurrently. That's hard to do. I've done it. We did it at Target. We got to 16 concurrent teams after about 6 months of labor, right? So they wanted to do that. They want to cover all the teams. And this is like 1,000 engineers in this organization. And they want to productize their Dojo offering. Their value consistency. Everyone going through this pipeline is going to have a very consistent experience. Okay? I'm going to go ahead right to the outcome. By some definition, it was successful, right? By my definition, not so much. I think cranky teams being forced in this one-size-fits-all training, and it's like product training and kind of engineering training, but then you have teams that are like, dude, I make APIs. Can you treat APIs like a product? Yes, you can. Did all the content that we put them through in that training address that? No, it didn't, right? So the relevancy factor was there. Or, dude, I make a commercial, I use COTS-based software. We write YAML, right, kind of thing. Did this stuff apply? So you have these teams where they're being guided into a very opinionated structure that doesn't really match their circumstances. Also an abbreviated challenge length. So rather than 6 weeks, 4 weeks, and I'm kind of like over trying to shorten challenges. If you want to shorten challenges, find someone else to work with. It's kind of like you just want workshops, you just want training, you just want awareness. You don't want proficiency, you don't want practice, you don't want learning. So, what happens is coaching fatigue. I mean, these coaches get 2 weeks to deal with cranky people, and then the next team comes along, also cranky, and the next team comes along. Who would like to work in that environment, right? So fatigue, heavy on output, light on results. So I'm sure you're all familiar with this, Kubler-Ross change curve. I think this kind of explains where this is. And when you're thinking about transformation that involves practice and learning and behavior change and habit forming and really going after substantive impacts, you have to kind of think about where people are, right? And I think what happened with this particular group is, where you want them to be really is in this stage, right? Where they're, I'm willing to experiment and make some decisions about changing my practice, right? What happened with this group, though, is because scaling became the dominant factor in, how we kind of do this, this is where we got the teams, right? All that good stuff, shock, denial, anger, like, why am I changing? What is a dojo? What are you talking about, right? So when I say scale like a product, I mean literally take product, mindset, discovery, product model, and apply that to your transformation, right? And, so this comes from a guy, Brian Todd, great article, awesome. If you're new to product, this is an awesome short, it's a long read, but it's like a short investment to really get the concept. But I'm going to borrow his model here, right? He's got this Venn diagram where you have product market fit is when viability, desirability, and feasibility converge. It is that intersection of all three, right? Viability, will it make us money? Will it let us save money? What's the goal? What's the upside? Usually it's some kind of bump on income statement, right? P&L, right? Desirability, who wants it? Who needs it? Who even cares about it here? Right? Is this a problem that needs solving? Is it relevant to an individual group that you're engaging with your transformation? And then feasibility, everyone's favorite. Can we do it? Just because you can doesn't mean you should, right? So I think where we get stuck is, I call it the feasibility trap. That red bottom thing. We can do it. We can scrum, till the cows come home, right? We can do all of this stuff, but should we do it, right? And if that's where your transformation's focused on the mechanic, right, I think you're kind of missing the boat. Desirability is probably the best place to start, and this is kind of the path to product market fit. So if we were going to go build a product, the first thing we would do is say, well, what are our ideas? Do we have any hunches, any bets we want to make, right? And then we'd get out the door and go see, can we validate that? Do we see other people having that problem? Can we talk to people that can be like, yeah, that's a problem, but actually it's a little bit more nuanced than that. So really we're amplifying learning here, right? Well, once we get a little bit of validation down that path and start going up, well, what can we do to address the problem? This is where feasibility comes in to match with desirability, right? What hypotheses can we make that are falsifiable? What experiments can we try to see if we're creating a transformation offering that's actually solving a problem? So I'm saying start small. And then once we get there, now we're at like problem solution fit, okay? We know what the problem is and we're experimenting on solutions and we have some really good candidates. Let's now start to iterate, right? Let's start to get out there and get some experience with that. And then after that, that's where you get unrequited demand. That's where you scale it, right? Dojos don't work unless you follow this path, right? I can tell you all about it, okay? I think you have to start small. You have to say, what do teams actually need? In a way, a proper dojo will do that with every team. It's really like mass customization. You bring a team in and say, what's your problem? You build a challenge specifically for them. You're going to be some commonalities like mob programming and TDD and all that stuff. These are good practices, right? But you're going to build something specific to that, where that team is. So scale like a product, at least in this space. I'm not saying other frameworks can't work in this way. I do, by and large, think the dojo is a post-agile technology. I think you need to do some work with agility and forming your teams and thinking about how your org structure works before dojos can really make a huge difference. Okay, let's wrap up. So there are all kinds of large-scale change initiatives, right? And as you can probably tell as you read through this slide, I'm kind of over this level of thinking or limiting my thinking to this. Fixating on these things is missing the point. The goal isn't SAFe or Scrum or Kanban. The goal isn't discovery frameworks or tool chains or Kubernetes or serverless or dojo. That's not the goal. It's not to say those things aren't useful means, but they're certainly not the end. Consulting group McKinsey says 70% of transformations fail. Right? And you have to wonder why that is. And I think it has to do with going for solutions and shortcutting the search for those semi-wicked problems that really need solving. Right? Like, why do you want to be agile? You want to embrace change. You want to be able to change your friggin' mind, right? You want to pivot course when you learn something new. You don't want to set a plan that's the same for 18 months and chunk on it. That's not agile. And out of your DevOps investment, what do you really want? You don't want just to be like approved by the cool kids with the fun colored hair. You want a sustained speed of delivery, right? You want to maybe treat availability of your services as feature 0, right? You want to get, like, when things go south, which they will, you want to be able to capture that knowledge and maybe make a more resilient system. And going to product should help you delight your customers, right? Should help you find new markets, innovate and grow. These are the frameworks and tools. They're the things on the top, but they help us get to the more important things at the bottom, the impact, right? This is what we kind of have to stay focused on. And when we fixate on the tools, it's easy to get lost in the sauce. You want the impact. And I think there's something at the root of these impacts and their associated frameworks, mindsets, tools, etc., that's probably more important to focus on. Like, what's the goal? What are you trying to get to? And it's something that's fundamental, something that's visionary. It's a property of our overall systems and organization. You could even say culture. It's like that level. It's hard to define, but it's big and it's pervasive. Something that if we don't attain or strive toward, all these changes are for naught. And even temporary successes will be just that. They'll be ephemeral. They'll be temporary. And I think for me, this is the learning organization. I'm trying to bring the 90s back, baby. Okay? My thesis is that this is the end state that underlies all successful large change initiatives, right? That compound and grow on one another. And those big impacts, fostering a culture of learning, is how you get systemically at one impact after the next. What is a learning organization? I'm going to leave you with a couple quotes here. Right? This is from Peter Senge, Fifth Discipline, 90s seminal work on systems thinking. A learning organization is a place where people continually expand their capacity to create the results they truly desire, where new and expansive patterns of thinking are nurtured, where collective aspiration is set free, and where people are continually learning how to learn together. That is beautiful. It's gorgeous prose, right? It's juicy. It's also utopic. How do you get there is the question, right? David Gavin, another 90s learning dude, goes further, and he says a learning organization is an organization skilled at creating, acquiring, and transferring knowledge, and at modifying its behavior to reflect new knowledge and insight. So now we've connected learning to doing, right? We've connected learning to behavior, learning to practice, and those two kind of go hand in hand. And I'd say each of these strategies pushes us toward a more learning-focused organization. Each of these strategies have multiple tactics, and I've shared a few of my favorites today, a few stories, a few tools. But I encourage you to experiment and find your own, right? And this is where community can really help. It's helped me. 99.3% of stuff I showed you is stolen. Curated. So you may have noticed that we started small, right? With collaboration and person-to-person interaction. so-called team level. I already told you how I feel about that. Then we progress to an overall philosophy of treating your transformation as a product. So these can be big strategies, big audacious things that affect the whole org, or they can be small micro interactions that compound to affect the whole org. Despite the size or scale of these strategies, they share a common DNA. Experiments, collaboration, knowledge becomes action, action becomes habit, habit becomes culture. But in order to get there, we need to first change our priorities, right? You have to make room for learning. None of this works. Balancing learning with delivery. When we make room for learning, faster, more valuable delivery comes as a happy side effect. Higher quality software comes as a happy side effect. Happier customers comes as a happy side effect. Better business outcomes come as a happy side effect. Right? Okay. That's it. Thank you.